welcome to the show. It's nice to be able to have this conversation with you. So, first, I'll have you introduce yourself and like what you're doing here at UNO.
Yeah, thank you for doing this.
Yeah.
My name is Cecily Jones. I am a MA candidate in the School of Communication, so I'm working right now to get my master's in communication. I'm also a graduate teaching assistant for an introduction to journalism and media communications class. So I basically just assist with Dr. Andrea Weir in that class. And I think that kind of wraps up like education. As for extracurriculars, if that's relevant, I'm an event coordinator for Maverick Productions and then running for chief of staff in student government.
Cool. Okay, so like I've been doing with all the other guests and I mentioned before, let's go into some of your background. So, what was it like for you growing up and where did you grow up?
Yeah, I grew up in Gretna, Nebraska. It's like a suburb just south of Omaha, I believe. Um, Growing up, I guess Gretna's kind of a small town. I don't know how the nicest way to say this. It's a very white town. So that was kind of not the best growing up, but my dad's Korean, I guess I should preface that. But it's got a really good school system, so I guess it's got that going for it. I don't know what else you would like to
So,
hit on for.
so when you were, what did you do as far as like extracurriculars or like what type of stuff were you involved in as a
Yeah.
kid, elementary school,
Um,
middle school?
Elementary school, I mean, you did like your kiddie soccer and t-ball and stuff like that. I didn't really start to get into extracurriculars until high school. Um, I did show choir for a couple of years. That's actually how I met a lot of the friends that I still have today. I did musical for a couple years. I did one act, which is like theater, for a couple years. I really found myself in yearbook, though. I was the advertising manager for yearbook. I met a lot of really great people there, and it's interesting because I ended up getting my bachelor's in communication, majoring in journalism, but I started out pre-med, so I took a little bit of a turn after high school, but eventually found my way back to journalism. So
What, um, okay, what were you like academically? Like, were you a good student? Were you a bad student? Were you mid?
I was probably too invested in academics. That's something that I actually like. Um, Very much like I have to get an A or the world is gonna end type of a thing. I think I actually ended up going to Creighton for like a single semester my freshman year, wanting to go pre-med, wanting to become a psychiatrist, and absolutely did not like the environment there. Ended up transferring, and I found that once I started studying like journalism, advertising, like things that I enjoyed, I cared a lot less about getting the A and more about the actual project or the assignment. But I definitely used to be like way too invested in academics. So
Was that like intrinsic or was that from like parents or external forces, like that motivation to be an A student?
probably both. My mom is ex-military. She's a veteran. So she's always kind of had that very much like you have to give it your all mentality. So that definitely played a factor. But I'm also kind of a people pleaser. So like I wanted to get the good grade for myself as well, I guess. But yeah.
Okay. So you were involved in a few things in middle school, high school. Um, cool. When you were going to college and you were making that step, what were some of the different things that you were considering?
Like when I was picking programs or.
When you were picking like locations, like you picked Creighton for your first
Mhm.
semester, or like picking your major, like stuff like that. What were some of the different things you were considering, like your senior and junior year?
Yeah, so I knew financially that I'd have to stay in Nebraska. So I was looking at Nebraska schools that I'd have to live at home, so specifically Omaha schools. I applied to Creighton because they've got a really good pre-med track. And at the time, I love psychology. I still do. I really wanted to be a psychiatrist. But I guess I applied to UNO. I applied to Creighton. I got into Creighton. And I was like, well, I might as well. But that was kind of, I guess, my process. There wasn't a lot really in terms of like, I don't know. I was pretty limited since I was stuck to Omaha, so there wasn't a lot of things for me to consider, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like, this is kind of touching on the campaign, but mental health is a really big thing to me. And so that's why I originally wanted to go into psychiatry. But after I decided to transfer to UNO, I started out just kind of like taking basic classes to figure out what I wanted to do. I didn't know if I wanted to do the psychiatry path still or not. And I just kind of fell back into yearbook, kind of like advertising, journalism stuff. So I don't know if it was necessarily a conscious choice or more so just like, well, I know how to do it, so I might as well give it another shot.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So when you transferred from high school into college, I mean, you eventually left after that one semester, but like, what was that first semester like as a new college student?
Mm-hmm. Not to speak ill of Creighton, because I know some people love it, but it is a very hard community to break into, especially as a commuter. They don't have a lot of accessible events for commuter students. It's very much focused on their on-campus body. So that was kind of a rough adjustment for me, if I'm being completely honest. Other than that, I don't know. I guess it is. I think for anyone, it's like a rough adjustment going into college. I don't want to make it sound like I had a terrible time because it wasn't that bad, but I really do think it was just like a lack of community was really hard for me because in high school I was involved in all of these like community-based clubs and organizations, so having that disconnect going into college was really rough. And there weren't a lot of people that I knew who were going to Creighton at the time, so it was just like this whole new world. So socially, it was just like a culture shock, I think, for me.
Okay. Okay. I forgot one thing that you kind of just like brought this up in my mind. So back in high school,
Mm-hmm.
when you were involved in some of these different things, were there any like key events or like any key people that you met that were formational in who you are right now?
Yeah. I guess I'm thinking. My yearbook teacher, Mrs. Beignot, I mean, yearbook at our high school was intense. Like it was like a part-time job, intense. So we spent a lot of time in that classroom with that specific teacher, and I definitely think she was formative for my kind of younger years. She was very vocal about politics as much as she could be as a high school teacher.
Yeah.
So that kind of also shaped kind of my direction in politics, which I'm not going to get into too much. I don't want to anything, but so definitely she was very important. There are a couple other teachers that I worked closely with that I would say are maybe the opposite of formative. We're very much like, oh, I don't want to be that person, but I think probably just Mrs. Beignot. Yeah.
Yeah, you can learn a lot from those individuals that, I mean, both that you're like, yeah, I want to be just like him or her, or I definitely do not want to be
No,
them.
exactly, yeah.
I see what they're doing and how they're impacting like the people around them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be that.
Yeah, for
Because
sure.
you can learn a lot from that.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have any like leadership experience in any of your clubs or organizations in high school?
I was the advertising manager in yearbook. So that was technically a leadership position. I was in charge of running the ad section and having all of the other members sell ads, communicate with the businesses or whatever. Other than that, I don't think I was in any like executive or leadership roles in the clubs that I was a part of. I'm not sure a lot of them even had kind of those leadership roles available. I think that's probably it.
So as like the ad manager,
Mm-hmm.
was that like your first main leadership role ever in life, basically?
More or less, I guess. I mean, I worked at a daycare throughout high school, which I guess you could consider a leadership position. But outside of that, probably it was the first time that I don't want to say I was in charge of, but I was in charge of like a group of people.
Were there any like key takeaways? Because when I was in high school, my junior year, I was in marching band and I was on the drum line, and I was the like section lead of the drum line / percussion, and that was my worst leadership experience. So that was a situation where I learned what not to do, and I just don't repeat any of those same mistakes.
Yeah.
But there was a lot that I learned nonetheless, like good and bad. So was there anything jumping into that situation that you're like, wow, okay, this is what leading is actually like. I will continue doing this, or I will not continue doing this?
I think thankfully for me, a lot of people who were in yearbook wanted to be there more or less. So it felt less like I have to lead this group and more like I'm helping them complete whatever it is that they're doing. I will say, though, that it definitely taught me that establishing like kind of a strong presence does go a long way in having people actually respect what you have to say. So that's something I think also as a people pleaser, that's something that I've definitely needed to work on, is kind of like establishing authority when it's necessary. Otherwise, people just don't really care what you have to say. So
how would you say to go about establishing that authority? Because there's different ways of
100%,
doing that. Someone could be like, oh, okay, she just said establish authority, so I'm just going to start yelling at people and doing orders, which obviously you do not want to do. So how would you recommend going about doing that?
I think it really comes down to being someone that people want to respect. If you don't have a good relationship with whoever it is you're working with, they're not going to listen to you. So I think first off is just like being a decent human being and making people respect you on that front, because then it's a lot easier to be like, okay, well, it's time to get to work. Let's get our stuff done. I think it also has to do with, what's the word I'm looking for? Almost like consistency. I don't know. Like, I feel like consistent communication, or like you can't be wishy-washy in a position of leadership, which is also something that I kind of learned over the years. But I don't know. I think it ultimately just comes down to having good relationships with the people you have to work with. I don't know.
Yeah. I just know some people struggle with that, myself included.
Yeah.
And that's always just something to improve upon.
Oh, yes, always.
One thing I noticed that I find, I mean, even currently difficult is you want to be able to be like friendly, because I'm in some leadership positions. You want to be like friendly and be able to like joke around with people, then also have the like authority or like leadership authority to be like, okay, guys, we got to lock it in. We got to do this stuff. So like being able to like have, I guess it's a dichotomy of those two different sides is rough, because I see some people that are more on one side because it's like, oh, I need to be friendly with them. So like I'll make memes, I'll like joke around and mess around. And then when I want to be serious, it's like, well, they don't take me seriously. And then you have people that are just serious all the time, and people don't think you're cool to be around. So
that's a good point. Yeah.
It's a hard like dichotomy to figure out.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know. I don't think I have an answer for you, but I agree. It is hard to balance the two.
I mean, for us young leaders, I guess the best thing is to just go out and read or listen to podcasts of people that are like twice our age that have more experience than us.
Yeah.
Or I guess people that are our age that have more experience. But the first thing is just being aware that that is a pitfall that people fall into. So then you're at least cognizant of it, and you don't make the same mistakes.
For sure.
Okay, cool. I'm glad that we took that little reroute back to high school.
Yeah.
Okay, so college, you mentioned some of the different things about Creighton, and then you left Creighton, and then I'm guessing you started in the fall. And then when did you start at UNO?
Yeah, So I transferred out of Creighton after that first semester. I took a couple classes at Metro, what would have been spring semester of my freshman year. And then fall semester of my sophomore year, I transferred into UNO. I think that was in 2020. That was during the pandemic, so it's all kind of like one giant glob of time. But yeah, I think fall 2020 is when I transferred in, and classes were almost entirely online at that point, I believe.
Yeah, I'm also a transfer student.
Gotcha.
So I think I took my first class here, I think summer 2020, and that was just one class.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went full time in the fall. So yeah, I definitely understand. All my classes were online,
Mm-hmm.
and orientation was not too good.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, so they were still figuring some stuff out, which
For
is
sure.
understandable.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I get, because during the debate you were talking about
Mm-hmm.
some of the different struggles that transfer students have to deal with.
Yeah.
And I could resonate with some of that stuff because I had to
Yeah.
go through it.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you start once you got on the campus? Like, how did you start, like, finding your footing, like getting involved, being a good student, like stuff like that?
Yeah, so my time at UNO for undergrad was pretty brief. It was only 2 years. Both of those years were during the pandemic. I think the second semester of what would have been my senior year was like the first semester that we were really truly back on campus in person, at least for like the bulk of my classes. So it was a very short turnaround in kind of my opportunity to be involved and find my footing on campus, so to speak. I think UNO's School of Comm is like a pretty small community. So I guess in that sense, I found kind of my place in that I knew most of the people here. I've been taking, albeit online classes, I've been taking classes with them for a while. So I guess just kind of finding my little community in the School of Communication. I also just like spent a lot of time on campus my senior year. I had like classes back to back, and so I think that really helped in familiarizing myself with campus itself because I hadn't really stepped foot on UNO's campus before. Yeah, I didn't really find my footing, I would say, at UNO until this past semester because this is like the first time I've been back on campus when everything is like slightly back to normal and I could start joining different organizations and I could go to these events. And I really do think it did just come down to finding community on campus and like we kind of mentioned in our campaign, getting off the bench, going to events. So I think that's how I found my footing, I guess. I don't know.
So were you involved in any like clubs or extracurriculars during your undergrad time here, or no?
I I was briefly a member of Sustain UNO. I was briefly a member of Mav Radio, and I was briefly a member of Women in Media. But because we were online, there weren't really events happening, so there weren't opportunities to really connect or interact with people as much as I would have liked. Again, I graduated technically in 3 years, but my first year was a semester at Creighton and 2 online classes at Metro, and then 2 kind of in-person online classes at UNO here. So there really weren't a lot of opportunities at the time to get involved, which I think is why I'm so eager to now that I'm in grad school in these last couple of years that I have here.
So do you have any tips? Say that someone's going to be transferring in, either starting in the summer or the fall. Would you have any recommendations for them?
So I think for commuter students specifically, it would probably be good to see what organizations exist in the school that you're a part of. So for the School of Communication, we've got stuff like Mav PR, PRSSA, what else do we have? Just like finding those little clubs and organizations associated with your school, and then you can start to find events that they host, and then that just kind of like snowballs. And then not to like self-promote, but Mav Pro on Instagram, we host events all the time, and they are free to students. So if you follow us on Instagram, you'll get keyed into a lot of free events.
With food.
With food. Yeah, that's a big draw. Usually free t-shirts too, which people go crazy for. But yeah, I think just kind of first starting out in your own little network, your own school, what happens inside there, and then it makes it a little bit easier to branch out, I guess.
Yeah, I would recommend, because my first semester, I guess I had one class, and it was in this building all the way up on the third floor in like the auditorium. And that class was phenomenal. That was taught by Patrick McNamara, and it was like global challenges.
Gotcha.
If anyone wants to take like a global, like a gen ed course to feel that like global thing, take that class. It's phenomenal. But anyway, so I took that class here. But other than that, I just like rolled up to that garage, walked up the stairs, attended the class, and then left.
100%,
So I wasn't really
yeah.
involved.
Yeah.
But in the spring semester, I got a job on campus.
Oh, nice.
So I actually got to communicate with other people in my college because it was like a CS tutor in PKI.
Gotcha.
And yeah, that was the best academic move I've made as far as like socializing and networking ever. Because just like getting involved in one thing and then branching out, like what you said, that's the key. My college experience would have been absolutely more difficult and very different if I had not have taken that job to get involved. Yeah, so I think it's very important for people like transfer student or like a standard traditional student or whatever type of student to get involved somehow at whatever level you can. Like maybe you have like a full-time gig, so you can't really do a lot, but maybe just rolling up to a meeting every now and then when you can, just to like socialize with people and network with people is very important.
Yeah, and I think that's too. It specifically for like your non-traditional students or your commuter students, like people who live on campus in dorms are constantly being bombarded with like various opportunities, things happening on campus like day of, and they have that ability to just jump over from their dorms and go. So it really is important for people who may not have that privilege to live on campus to find different opportunities to connect, because I think it's really important to have like a full well-rounded college experience to be involved in campus. Otherwise, it's just 4 years of your life that you take classes.
Yeah.
It's pretty lackluster otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, like socially, I would say if you're not really a social person, there's still like some heavy benefits to socializing.
Yeah.
Because like I said, it made my experience easier. Like being able to talk with people in the same track, but like 2 years down the line that I've taken the different classes I'll be taking, that helps immensely. Knowing which professors to take and which ones not to take, that helps immensely. So, I mean, it helps in a lot of different areas to just get involved and socialize with your fellow students.
For sure.
And it could be rough. Well, yeah, it could be rough for some people. Like starting off, it was very rough for me, but
100%, yeah.
it pays off eventually.
Yeah.
And it's always a good time. So, all right. So you get your bachelor's degree. What do you get your undergrad degree in?
Bachelor of Science in Communications, or Communication, singular. Major in journalism, media communication, concentration in advertising, PR, second field of study in creative writing. It's a mouthful for what, like, as simple as it is, but that's undergrad. Does that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
And then did you graduate in like May?
I graduated in August 2022. Yep.
Okay. And then the next semester, did you go into your graduate stuff?
Yep, straight in.
Okay, so as far as making that jump, because I think you're going to be the only one of these 6 that are going to have this perspective. So why did you decide to go into graduate school?
So there are a few reasons. One of them being I felt like my undergrad experience was truncated by the pandemic. So I wanted to have more opportunity to, again, get involved on campus and have that quote unquote true college experience. So that was one reason. Another reason was in advertising and PR, to get the higher paying jobs, you either have to have a lot of experience or a master's degree. So that was the other reason. And then I knew that potentially I would want to teach at a collegiate level. So to do that, I'd have to get a PhD. So all of those reasons combined, it made sense to apply for the master's program. It's only 2 years. I figured I can decide a little bit later what I want to do with it. But yeah.
Is there do you have to pay for it, or is there programs to where they pay for it for you?
Yeah, so UNO's School of Communication offers graduate teaching assistant positions. And if you're awarded one of those positions, they waive your tuition and then you get paid a stipend for working part-time, 20 hours a week. You still have to pay student fees, but it does take a load off when you've got that tuition waiver and then the stipend. So that was also a big draw, especially because they call them GTAs, graduate teaching assistants. The GTA positions here aren't as competitive as your other programs, so your chances are a little bit better of getting kind of like a ride through grad school, so to speak.
Why? So you talked about your thought process of choosing local universities for undergrad. Did you have that same mindset still, local?
Mm-hmm.
Why of the local options did you choose UNO for grad school?
So partially it was financially. It's a smart decision to stay in home. Also, although I had gone through undergrad in the pandemic, I had already started to build relationships and foundations and connections and networks at UNO. I really love the staff in our School of Comm, the faculty here. The professors are really awesome. They're all very personable, and it's a small program. It's a small, close-knit community here. And so I figured, I know these people. I like these people. I like this community. Let's see what I can do in 2 more years, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you were... I don't remember if you mentioned this in the beginning. I think you did, but I forgot. What was because you're getting your master's in communication,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm guessing there's a concentration or something. What is your concentration within the communication field?
So you get your master's in comm, and the cool thing about communications is that it dips a toe in every single field you can imagine. So we've got some people who are interested in doing broadcasting, radio, TV type stuff. We've got people who are interested in health comm. We've got people who are interested in advertising. With this program, you get to choose. So there are core classes you have to take, just like in undergrad. But then for electives or other seminars, you can kind of pick and choose which ones kind of funnel into that ultimate goal of advertising, comm studies, broadcast, right? For me, that is... I've decided that I want to get my PhD. So for me, that is looking at areas of research that align with the programs I want to apply for. And right now that is gender studies and health communication. So I guess it's not necessarily a concentration, but that's what a lot of my classes and a lot of my research is central to in grad school, because you do a lot of research or pilot studies or research proposals in these classes. So that's kind of that overall lens that I'm using for all of the classes, if that kind of answers your question.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So you start you said in the fall as as a grad student.
Mm-hmm.
What is it like as a grad student? You have an office,
Mm-hmm.
you're teaching a class, you have a different your courses start with an 8 instead of a 4 or a 3.
Yeah.
They're probably more difficult. So what is it like transitioning from an undergrad student to a grad student?
So this is where I've got a little bit of a leg up. I've always been kind of a little bit too focused on my grades, so the transition academically wasn't that hard for me, just because that kind of academic rigor is something that I like and something I look forward to. I think if anything, it's mostly just time management. A lot of your grad classes are going to be evening classes. So learning to balance your days, I think, was kind of hard for me because I'll be like, oh, I've got 10 hours until class. I can put off this reading assignment, or I can put off this assignment. It ultimately just came down to like kind of restructuring the way I look at my day. In undergrad, it's like I get all my classes done in the morning or afternoon, and then I have the entire night to myself. That was probably the biggest adjustment for me. The thing that you'll hear a lot about grad school is that the people who are in grad school want to be in grad school. So everyone is like kind of in that same boat of we got to do well, we got to do our stuff. So it's a good environment. It holds you accountable, especially working in this office with the GTAs all the time. It's a really awesome community. Like the professors will say sometimes like, yeah, we know the grad students are in their office because we can hear them across our office. I went on off a tangent, but I think I answered your question, maybe?
Yeah.
A little bit? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, because I don't know. I don't really plan to go into grad school. If it happens, it happens, but it's not like a plan. But I'm sure there will be people that listen that are interested in it.
Yeah.
So maybe not like trying to do exactly what you're doing with like communication, but maybe like engineering or I don't know.
For sure.
Physical fitness, I don't know.
Yeah.
Something. Okay, so when you started, did like that semester, did you start getting involved in like, you're in Mav Pro now. I don't know what other organizations you're involved in, but did you just start getting involved like immediately, or did you like take a semester to just like take it in?
So I had applied for Mav Pro the spring of my last year of undergrad. Got in for what would be the first year of my grad program. So first semester, this past fall, I was already in Mav Pro. We were already having events, having meetings, and that I think that's the only org I was a part of at the time. But being involved on campus through Mav Pro made me realize that I want to be more involved in campus, which is why I've kind of taken this initiative to join more orgs, go to more like event programming stuff. I will say that I definitely think for those people who are interested in potentially going to grad school that it might not be a bad idea to hold off for a semester to get involved, just because there are a lot of adjustments. But yeah, I think Mav Pro just made me want to be on campus more. So.
Okay. And I'd be remiss if I didn't ask this, because one of my favorite things and like one of my future goals for this like project is like knowledge transfer. So like sharing what you know or what I know to like the people listening or watching. So you mentioned before time management and having to shift that around. How would you recommend if someone is like not good at time management, or they want to improve, or they need to like make a switch like what you had to do? Are there any like steps or any recommendations that you'd have to go about bettering their time management skills?
Okay, so this is kind of niche. But one thing that I noticed, especially coming off the pandemic, is that my productivity went down when I was at home once things started to go back to normal, because I had crossed this barrier in my mind where the living room was for work and for pleasure. So when I'd sit down at my couch and I'd start working on my computer, I'd get distracted and do a million different things, and then I'd end up never completing the task I originally sat down to do. So my biggest thing is like create workspaces that are not the same spaces that you do like hobbies and activities and like free time in. For me, what that looks like is like setting aside a chunk of my time that I'll go to a coffee shop in Omaha, or I'll go to the library for like an extended period of time where I don't have the distractions, because then it forces you to get your work done. And if you build that time into your day, like you plan on, yes, I'm going to go to Chris Library from noon to 5 p.m. and I'm going to get all my work done, then you also don't risk that crossing of boundaries of your workspace and your home space, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
I wouldn't really say that's niche, because I do that as well. And I've listened to other shows like different podcasts and they recommend people do that. Yeah, it's the same thing why you're not supposed to like, I mean, there's people that live on campus, so it's kind of hard to like, you do a lot of your different stuff in the same room that you sleep.
Oh, dorm living is rough.
Yeah, but you're not supposed to like do all your different stuff in your bedroom,
Yeah.
it's not productive.
It's the same argument they make for like not having a TV in your bedroom or
Yeah.
Yeah.
The bedroom should be just like for sleeping, getting dressed,
that's it.
like all that stuff, like
Yeah.
prepping your day basically, and then you
Mhm.
do your day stuff in the other rooms.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree with that 100% because when I'm at home and I want to be productive, I mean, I can get some level of productivity,
Yeah.
but there's way more distraction, so it's there.
Mhm.
The ability to be less productive is higher.
Yeah.
If I'm on campus somewhere or at like a coffee shop or like McDonald's, anywhere
Yeah.
but home.
Anywhere but home.
Yeah, you're just more focused. You
Mhm.
have way less distractions.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just wanted to touch on that because there might be people that are like, they
Well, how do
mentioned
I
it,
do
but yeah,
it?
how do I do
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
Okay, so going back, so you start getting involved with Mav Pro. There's a lot to unpack. Okay, so
You're good.
you're teaching a class.
Mhm.
What is? I'm guessing that started in the fall.
Yes.
So what is like that teaching experience like? Now you're at like the other side.
It was scary for sure at first. So, the intro to JMC, Journalism Media Comm class, is an entry level lecture hall. We can fit up to 50 students in that class. And having 50 like freshmen, sophomores who have no clue what they're doing, staring at me, expecting me to know what I'm supposed to do, it was really scary at first. One thing that I've noticed now that I've done it for a semester is that what's the right way to phrase this? Like, it might sound weird, but the students are just as confused as I am. So if I'm having an off day or if I stumble on my words, they're probably not paying that close attention anyway. So that's a little bit of a relief. I will say that it's been a really great opportunity in public speaking. Like, I don't like public speaking, but being a GTA teaching this class has really helped me kind of like get over that fear. It's also really a cool experience from a relatively younger grad student getting to work with these other students. I feel like it's a different sense of camaraderie than you normally get in these positions of GTAs working with freshmen, sophomores. And I don't know, I think not to be cheesy, but it is really cool knowing that like I have the ability to like inspire these kids to want to study journalism just like I do, or advertising specifically. Yeah, I think that kind of touched on the question maybe.
Yeah, it's I've never taught like a college course or any sort of course, but I did spend time going back to the high school that I went to, and I was like a drumline tech for 2 seasons.
Gotcha.
So I helped out with that and got to like help teach some kids how to drum correctly and march correctly and have a good time. But yeah, it's you could take it as like the amount of like ways that you could take teaching. It's pretty cool because like you can just stick to the curriculum and teach based off the syllabus. I'm going to teach off my PowerPoint and that's it. Or you can like be a teacher that I'm sure you've had them that like they teach and they teach well, and then they also like inspire you to like be the best person that you can be, or inspire you to like get into the field that they're in, or they teach you like life lessons. Like, for example, when I took Spanish, it was either 1 or 2, there was a Spanish teacher called Senora Porras, and she was phenomenal. I don't really remember learning a lot of Spanish in that class, but I'm sure I did. I passed the class. But like she would just spend like a good amount of the time. I mean, not. I don't know if she still teaches there, so I don't want her to get fired. But like she'd spend a cool amount of time like teaching us like life stuff.
Yeah.
Like talking about stuff from like her life, and she'd just be like, "Yeah, just don't make the same mistake that I did." Like one day, she came into class and was like, "We're gonna talk about love languages in our Spanish class," and we were like, "Okay, sure, yeah, we're down."
Yeah.
So like it was just cool. Like those type of teachers that put in extra effort. So yeah, from like your position, like I kind of understand that there's a lot of power in what you do because you're
Mm-hmm.
influencing a lot of young minds,
Yeah.
especially when they're like moldable and impressionable.
Yeah, for sure.
So, okay, so Mav Pro, what's it like being in? Because you started that in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
What was the position that you got into in the fall?
Event coordinator. So there's your exec team and then all of your event coordinators. So I'm in that group.
So, as an event coordinator, there's a bunch of you, like you just said.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys have like specific areas of expertise, or do you guys just
So
like how does that work?
I'm going to try and do my best to explain this. We have like traditional events in in a school year that happen pretty frequently, like Earth Day or Very Berry, right? Then we've got other events, and as event coordinators, we can kind of choose, like, oh, I had this idea for an event, we should do this. And what happens is you'll get assigned, or you can make groups of 5 to 8, maybe, event coordinators who are like actually planning that event. So you'll only be on one of those groups maybe twice a semester. Otherwise, you are just attending meetings, you're assisting where you can, and you're working the events when they happen. Um, it's a lot of like, how do I buy this in bulk? Searches on Google. But yeah,
So, how do you like it so far?
I really like it. It can be stressful. Like, I'm not gonna lie, it can be very stressful. But one thing Robert, he's the current president of MavPro, mentioned is that if something goes wrong from the outside perspective, no one knows that it's gone wrong. It's only us on the inside. And that's like something that I think we should think about in a lot of places of our life. But it's really fun. I like the group that we currently have as event coordinators and exec are all very dedicated to like how do we include every student, like how do we make this more accessible to students, which again is something that's really important to our campaign. So it's been like a really cool environment. It's also just fun to make friends on campus. Like even if I don't work with them on event planning groups, I can like see someone walking down the strip or whatever and be like, hey, how are you? Yeah.
So, when you got started into, is this like your first time like managing events and like running events, or did you have previous experience doing this type of stuff?
Technically, yes, this is the first time. I mean, I we'd have events that I'd help out with for different clubs in high school, or like I was an intern for Vala's Pumpkin Patch, and I'd help with like little things here and there. But this is the first time that I've truly had like total creative freedom or control on whatever it is that we're doing, or the opportunity to do that.
What were some? Were there any like big things that you learned when you first got into the role?
Um, the amount of work that goes into planning these events, because I attended a few of them as an undergrad, and they come together so flawlessly from the outside perspective. Again, once you're on that other side of the whatever, um, there's a lot that goes into planning these events, and I think maybe just like a newfound respect for event planners in general. There are a lot of like the what is it like metaphor I like to use is like constantly putting out little fires. Like that's so much of the job is putting out little fires. I feel like event of the day of an event specifically. So I guess flexibility would be the biggest thing I've learned, just to roll with the punches.
What type of positions can people apply to get into as far as like Map Pro?
Yeah, so MavPro applications actually close today, I think, for general members. That's the event coordinators. That's what I am. You can also apply for executive positions. So there's like the president of MavPro, the VP of PR, and then you've got a bunch of director positions for like graphics, content, grant programming. So if other organizations come to us and are like, hey, will you give us money for this event? Then the director of grant, whatever, would be like, let me talk about it to the rest of the grant programming group. So those are the different positions that you can apply for. I think technically written into the bylaws you're supposed to have a year of experience under your belt before you apply to exec, but I think they make exceptions. I'm not entirely sure, though. Yeah.
Well, hopefully that exception's in the bylaws, or that's just not good.
Yeah.
So, okay, so the general membership are the event coordinators then. So there's
Mhm.
like no members below event coordinators.
Correct.
Okay, cool.
And they've done a really good job this year, too, of making it doesn't feel as divisive, like your exec team and your general members. It's more so just like all of us with a few of them who kind of like guide your event coordinators. So they've done a good job kind of breaking down those barriers this semester.
So by the time this gets on YouTube and it reaches people's eyes and ears, it'll be too late for them to apply.
Yes.
So do you have any recommendations if someone is interested in joining Mav Pro as an event coordinator or executive, I don't know, whatever, to like prepare, to like get through the application process? I don't know like how hard it is to get into or something.
For when I applied, you fill out like it was either a Google survey or something on Presence. I can't remember. But you fill that out, and then they'll call you in for an interview, and they'll just ask you about like why you want to join a Mav Pro, how you would kind of aid in the community. And I think the biggest thing is just like make sure you know why you want to join Mav Pro. It's not just like an offhanded, oh, this would be fun. So again, for me, it was really big on I wanted to join Mav Pro so that we could find more ways to access commuter students because the events happen oftentimes in high traffic times during classes in the afternoon. So if your commuter student has driven out to class for that class and then has to go back home and then an event happens, they can't. Anyway, just kind of have an idea of why you want to join Mav Pro. And also a big thing in Mav Pro is that we want to have fun. So I don't know, maybe just like go in with that mentality that it's not supposed to be super serious. And then also just like be yourself. Like they'll ask you probably like questions about your personality because they want to know like if you would fit in this community. So be yourself. It's cheesy, but
Do you have to have like previous experience going in
Nope.
or on the job training, huh?
Yep, you can
Cool.
be first semester or second semester, I guess technically, freshman year and apply and have just as good a chance as a soon to be senior, right? So
Cool. Okay, so before, I think we covered some stuff with the fall, and it is currently the spring, so we're
Correct.
starting to get into the campaign time.
yes.
So is there anything before we get into the campaign that you want to hit on that I have not touched on yet?
I don't think so.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Let's take a little break, and then we'll get into the campaign.
Okay.
Okay, so let's get started with part 2 and start getting into the campaign. It is you as the chief of staff, Ishani as the vice president, and then Robert as the president. I won't really go into like the beginning process of this because Ishani kind of talked about it.
Perfect.
So we'll get straight into some of the different stuff you guys want to tackle. So there's a lot. You have the 3 pillars. You have these 5 different initiatives, and then there's like one main goal that you personally have. So whatever you feel you want to talk about for the time that we have, just go ahead.
Awesome. Yeah, so our 3 pillars, we've got prioritize, harmonize, and maximize. And for me, the one that really rang true was maximize. Our whole idea with this pillar is maximizing student potential at UNO. Again, I cycle back to this a lot, but being a commuter student and a non-traditional student for part of my undergrad, and I guess technically now, the big thing for me is making students aware of the resources that they have available to them on campus. I mentioned this in the debate, but when I transferred in, I had no clue, like all of the free amenities available to me. And I feel like that's a really big disconnect between the student body. So for me, the really important part of our campaign is like conveying to students that we want to overall just increase communication between student government, student body, student org, student body, and even administration in the student body. I feel like there's just a huge disconnect. And UNO has the money to like provide all of these free resources, but we're not utilizing them as best as we could be. And I feel like that's kind of a disservice to the student body who's paying to be here. So that's kind of one of the big things. On top of that as well is mental health resources on campus. We have a lot of like little programs or like areas that people can go to. We've got CAPS, the Counseling and Psychological Services. I've gone to CAPS before. I encourage all of my current undergrad students to go to CAPS. The problem is they don't have the staff to serve all of our student body. And I argue that every person should have easy access to counseling services in college because, as we've talked about, it's a really stressful time. It takes a lot of adjustments. And so for me personally, I like really want to drive home kind of, first of all, destigmatizing conversations on mental health, especially on a college campus, but also creating, if not expanding CAPS, because it's kind of hard, just the way they're set up, but creating supplemental services and resources for students. One thing we've kind of talked about with senators is creating study groups, creating support groups, just again, kind of increasing the opportunity for community building, which can be very beneficial in your mental health, especially if you are struggling with a transition to college. So that's something that's really important to me that I'm bringing to this campaign. I think it also comes down, I've said it a couple times, but it's really just communication. We want to fix communication on campus because there's just, it's currently not happening the way it should be. One other thing that we kind of talk about in our campaign and we talked about in the debate is the opt-in messages for like alerts on campus and campus security alerts or something like that. Mm-hmm. I think at orientation, all students are offered the ability to like sign in for those opt-in text messages, but after orientation, it's never presented to you again. So that's another thing that I like really think we need to address is the fact that the phone number for these opt-in text messages that are really important is like not widely known, which is, I don't know, I think it's crazy, but I think those are kind of the big things for me.
Okay, so while you're taking a swig of water or whatever you have in there,
water, I'll clarify, it is water.
Yeah, water. I want to define real quick what your role is. Well, I'll let you define. So you're going to be chief of staff. What does that entail? Because you're the first chief of staff person,
I think they had one more. Or I'm not sure entirely. I'm kind of new to student government, but technically chief of staff is the person who fields your exec and your general members, so to speak, for a lack of better terms. They're kind of that in-between person. They also take on I think you can kind of look at it as like a catch-all. So whatever your president and your VP can't do or need help with, they go to their chief of staff for. And I think it's the same on the reverse side. So in student government, whatever your senators can't do or need help for, your first touch point is that chief of staff. And so for me, and again, Robert mentioned this, and I think it's a really good point. This is a new position. So the chief of staff has the potential to be a lot of different things. I think with our campaign goals in mind and just kind of my personal philosophy, my goal as chief of staff is to do all those things, right? To be a catch-all for exec, to be a touch point for senators, but overall just to increase communication between those two, as well as to foster a better environment. One thing Ishani mentions is that it can be very daunting. It can be very scary walking into a student government meeting or speaking up. And so one of my personal goals is to kind of make it less daunting, to make it a friendlier environment. Going back to the whole communication thing, to increase communication, to make it more fun. But yeah, I think it's technically just like an assist to your executive and then a touch point for your senators.
Yeah. So you'll be managing this is from like the bylaws because I want to make sure. So one of the key things I wanted to ask you was you're going to be managing like the executive team, which I won't list every single last one, but there's quite a few of them.
Yeah.
How do you plan on like leading this like team of executives basically?
I feel like I'm just repeating myself, but I think it just comes down to networking, first of all. So getting to know everyone on exec as best as I can. I guess, is your question more like a broad scope of like how do I anticipate to handle that, or?
Yeah, like, so, for example, you get the position, you get elected in, congratulations,
Mm-hmm.
hurrah. Now you're working, you have all these different goals, and then you have this leadership panel
Mm-hmm.
that enables you guys to help complete these goals. How would you work through this leadership panel to help, like, do all these different things? Like, what would be your guys's, I don't know, like, style of doing this?
I think, well, you have your like regular student government meetings and then exec meetings, right?
Yeah.
Another thing a lot, I think senators specifically have talked about is like streamlining things, making things work a little bit faster. So I think something to keep in mind as we go into, if we were to be elected, is creating like a set list of tasks and sticking to that list of tasks. When you've got so many people in a room working together, people go off everywhere on tangents. So I think kind of in that sense of like organizing thought, creating a strict like, okay, here's the agenda. We're not going to divulge from this agenda. I don't know if that really answers your question, maybe.
Yeah.
I think also like with the goal of wanting to make student government a more welcoming environment, maybe that even looks like having more student government bonding events. I'm not entirely sure if that goes on to what you're saying, but creating a stronger sense of community, knowing that everyone who's there wants to, what's the word? I feel like if there's a stronger sense of community within student government, the people who are going to be there, the people who are going to show up are going to want to get things done. And I think that just like cycles back to having a sense of community. It's kind of an amorphous answer though.
Yeah, it's very like a higher level, because I like leadership stuff and like understanding how people lead different groups of people, because I used to be very bad at it, and now I'm not bad at it. Like, I'm okay. Many areas to improve, but I'm not as bad as I used to be. So I just like learning how people like to lead to be better.
Sense.
But okay, so we have a few minutes. I have a question, but I don't want to just take up the last few minutes.
You're
if
good.
you have anything, do you have anything that like you want to touch on? I mean, you talk about some of the different things that you are passionate about, like mental health and creating this connection between the student body and like Senate and whatnot, or SGA. Is there anything else that you want to like press upon?
I mean, it's not necessarily related to student government, but it is related to what we've talked about for anyone who could be listening. I think we both kind of had that sense of we're maybe not the most extroverted people, but we've both found that through networking and connection that it really does increase your experience at college. So I guess my biggest thing would be to, get outside of your comfort zone, run for a position in student government, run for a position in Mav Pro, join a club that you aren't really sure on, just get involved on campus, because I think, again, that cycles back to bettering your experience in college, and also having those connections and sense of community is really important for mental health. So I think that would be my biggest thing, is try and get involved if you can.
Yeah. Okay. So my final question, and I'm asking this to everyone because it's one thing that I noticed both in my leadership experience and just watching SGA over like the fall and spring. When it comes to like endurance and stamina of like maintaining this energy and momentum, how do you, not like as like a group, but like you personally plan to keep like the energy that you start off with in the fall, like Durango days, everything's like exciting, everyone wants to do stuff, and then like it's right now in the spring and it's like, okay, the semester's winding down, maybe not as excited. So like, how do you keep the energy high or like the same to keep delivering on like what you guys are planning to deliver on?
I want to say first off that I don't think it's necessarily possible to always keep that same energy. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
Things happen in life. You get stressed, you get burnout. It happens. Expecting yourself to deliver at 100% of the time is never going to happen. You're setting yourself up for failure at that point.
Mm-hmm.
For me personally, it comes down to recognizing when I'm starting to notice those feelings of burnout, emotional or work, whatever. And having, again, I'm a broken record, a community or a person or someone you can go to kind of let go, de-stress, recap. Also just having people who understand, like one thing I really appreciate about Ishani and Robert is my workload is a little bit different. And so when I say, I can't make this meeting or I can't go to this club, I've got to do this or I'm in class, they're very understanding of that. And so for me, it comes down to being able to communicate my boundaries and then having people who respect them, I guess. So again, that sense of community. I also think it's important to recognize that, like, I mentioned this in the debate, we're all running, everyone on both tickets, we're all running because we want to better the student body's experience here. So it really just comes down to being able to humble myself when I'm feeling stressed. And if I'm like, oh, I don't want to respond to that email, I don't want to have this conversation, recognizing that, okay, well, I'm not doing it for me, I'm doing it for someone else. I think that can be a really big motivator when you're starting to feel that slump or that stress or that whatever.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will now be asking that question a little bit differently because, yeah, you can't maintain 100% the whole time and expect to be a mentally
We're just not built
good,
for it.
yeah, a
We
mentally
can't.
good human being. So, yeah, you answered it well, but
Okay.
yeah, I'll ask that in a better way later.
No need. I felt like that would maybe be important to mention because I feel like there is this mentality of like, gotta stay grinding, but you don't. Yeah, it's just not feasible.
Okay, well, we'll wrap this up. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Yeah.
This was been a little over an hour.
Mm-hmm.
The beginning part was a little bit longer than it should have been, but people got to understand like where you're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And we got to talk about some of the different policies and different things that you plan on doing within your position if elected.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for being a part of this cool project.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome.